It's election day in Chicago, and today voters in the Windy City will head to the polls to select their next mayor if it doesn't end up in a runoff.
That's a good point. With 9 candidates on the ballot, there's a real chance that incumbent Mayor Lori Lightfoot will not be elected to a second term. Our national correspondent Mike Carter joins us from our New York newsroom with more. Mike.
And Bob, good afternoon. Windy City voters are heading to the polls today. The question at hand, will Chicago re-elect first-term Mayor Lori Lightfoot, or is it time for a change? Well, heading into Election Day, Lightfoot finds herself trailing former Chicago Public Schools CEO Paul Vallas by 6 points. Vallas is a Democrat, but has been described as a pro-choice, or pro-police, I should say, conservative pseudo-Democrat. More importantly, though, for Lightfoot, take a look at how close her opponents are directly behind her. Keep in mind, there are 9 people running for mayor in Chicago today, and if nobody gets to at least that 50% mark, and so far no one's even close to that percentage, a runoff election between the top 2 candidates will be held on April 4th. Lori Lightfoot says one of the reasons she finds herself trailing in this race coming into Election Day is because she's a black and gay woman. But her critics point to Chicago's crime crisis, a crisis that's only gotten worse since Lightfoot came into office 4 years ago. Take a look. According to Chicago's police department, since Lightfoot took over as mayor, murders in the Windy City have risen by nearly 60%, with shootings up more than 40%. And while burglaries are down over the last 4 years in Chicago, those are reported burglaries, keep in mind. Overall theft is up by more than 30%, with motor vehicle thefts. Those are up a whopping 270%. So all of this has led Chicago voters to put crime and public safety at the very top of their list of concerns heading into Election Day. And with runoff appearing likely in this race, should Lightfoot not finish in the top 2 candidates, she would not only be the first Chicago mayor in decades to run for re-election and lose, she would also be the first mayor in Chicago history seeking re-election to fail to make a runoff. Right now, in a prospective runoff, guys, polling shows that Paul Vallas, would win that runoff if it does come down to him and Lori Lightfoot.
All right, Mike Carter, thank you so much.
You got it.
And joining us now to discuss the mayor's race is retired Chicago Police Lieutenant and attorney John Garrido and retired Chicago Police Officer and spokesperson for the National Police Association, Betsy Brantner Smith. Betsy, I'm going to start with you here. Your reaction to the election happening right now. I know we've spoken with you about Chicago crime before, and it seems like it's time for a change.
Well, it absolutely is. You know, I served as a Chicago suburban police officer, but what happens in Chicago affects all of us. And, you know, Lori Lightfoot came into office with a lot of hope from the voters as a former prosecutor. And yet what happened? She mishandled the pandemic. She horrifically mishandled the 2020 riots. She installed a superintendent that has been way too low key. She doesn't really support the men and women of the Chicago Police Department as you see crime continue to rise. So I think, and I'm hopeful that the voters are going to speak today and install a mayor or at least a couple of more pro-police candidates for their runoff, because Chicago cannot continue in this high crime direction.
Let's take a look at the latest polls. We saw a little bit from Mike before, but there is that chance that she won't even make a runoff, assuming there is one, John. What are your thoughts here? Why are people so upset? Because I think she came in, I may be wrong in this, but she had an enormous number. She was elected like with 70%, something like that.
Well, so if you're not safe where you live, where you work, or where your kids go to school and play, nothing else really matters. And she's completely dropped the ball on that. Chicago is significantly less safe since she's been in office. Those 270% increase in motor vehicle thefts, a large portion of those are actually carjacking. So it's not like somebody's stealing your car out in front of your house. They're actually pulling up with a gun and they're taking it from you. In the last election, she actually made it into the runoff with 17% of the vote. That was 90,000 voters. But when you look at the big picture here, there's 1.5 million registered voters, and 1 million of them stayed home last time. So only 35% came out. So while it looks like she went in with big numbers, it's kind of because we had such a low voter turnout. But as of, I think, noon today, we're up over 300,000 voters have come out so far today. And I don't think that includes the the early voting. And we've got, I think, another 200,000 absentee ballots that are out there. And then, of course, the evening surge. So I think voters are coming out strong, and I do not believe that she's going to make it wrong.
Betsy, Chicago residents say that crime and public safety is the #1 issue that will determine this election. We've been hearing a lot about the state of crime in Chicago. And for Lightfoot, she spent the final days of her campaign telling residents how one of her challengers, Brandon Johnson, wants to cut police. Yet, if you look at the crime stats under Mayor Lightfoot, they're pretty staggering. From 2019 to 2023, murder up 82%, robbery 33%, theft 24%, motor vehicle theft 333%. Do you think it really will come down to these incredibly strong increases in crime?
I think it will, because as the lieutenant said, people who don't feel safe aren't free. And I think most of the city of Chicago doesn't feel safe to move about a beautiful city that is so much fun to be in. We were the city that worked. And now Lori Lightfoot has, remember a couple of years ago, she infamously called the Chicago Police Department the biggest danger to residents in her city. I don't think people are going to forget. And I think that people are just exhausted from hearing about all the shootings, from worrying about being carjacked and robbed.
Yeah.
She just told street vendors, stop carrying cash, stop doing business in cash. And she blames everyone else but her own ridiculous policies, while she has increased her own security by threefold. So she's secure, but the rest of the city is not.
Final thought, John.
Yeah, I was just going to point that out. And you mentioned, she has 110 Chicago police officers on a security detail. That's up from 16 officers that the former mayor, Rahm Emanuel, had. So that just shows you how things have changed here. And she loves to use the police to protect her, but she doesn't want to use them to protect
So
the
she will
citizens.
defund police, but not her own police, right?
Of course, yeah. She's going to keep her detail strong.
All right, John Garrido and Betsy Brantner-Smith, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Well, the White House